They always say opposites attract. They never say opposites make for great marriages. No, they're attracting to each other. I like mob movies because it's a dark side of humanity that I could never do, but I'm attracted to it. But the saying is opposites attract. It's not opposites make great marriages. Bruce Arians and Tom Brady, to be honest with you, are opposites. Bruce likes a good cocktail. Tom doesn't drink during the season. And that's just the beginning of it. Now, they're both talented enough that they'll win 9 or 10 games. But yesterday, Arians talking about, Brady's interceptions. It's always about the deep ball. Tom was never about the deep ball, except the Randy Moss years. Arians is always about the deep ball, and he was talking about that yesterday.
We've got the guys open. We just missed them. There are times when coverage dictates you go to that guy. So I think we can do a better job of utilizing the deep ball in our game plan, more of or less of. So each and every week so different. But when they're there, we need to hit them. We can't have them going off our fingertips, and we can't overthrow them.
Okay, Tom Brady was never known as an elite deep ball thrower, except for a couple Randy Moss years. Arians' offense is all about the deep ball. So guess what? They're not really a perfect match. If you ask me who would be perfect with Bruce Arians, I'd be like, Big Ben, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen. Okay? He's not perfect for Tom Brady. He's not. And if you ask me who would be perfect for Tom Brady, I would say, Belichick, efficiency details, Sean McVay, Sean Payton. The reality is marriages can last when you're not perfectly suited for each other. But I could argue these guys are opposites. Let's do word association. I like to play this game all the time. I'll do this with my wife. If we have an argument, let's just do word association to clarify the argument. Brady, intense, workaholic, driven, details, precision. Clean living. Arians, loose, gambler, casual, outspoken. Not clean living. I mean, they're literally the opposites. And again, opposites attract. I get that. Opposites don't always work in a long-term marriage. And so, it's like there's a difference between bakers and grillers. Brady's more baker. You got to be precise with baking. I mean, I've made cookies before and just put a little too much butter in, and it's a mess. Like they're flat on the pan. You have to follow precision with baking. That is Brady. He is into precision. Grillers, it's different. How's it look? You poke the meat. How's it look? How's it feel? Marinades, dry rubs. It doesn't have to be exact. And so Bruce Arians, though talented, he only has one division title in his career. I think precision coaches win more. Belichick, Sean McVay's got 2 division titles. He's 34 years old. I have always said I prefer precision Aaron Rodgers over loose and talented Brett Favre. So my point being, these guys are talented enough to win 9 or 10 games. But if you really do word association, everything Arians talks about is always about the deep ball. That's never been Brady. Outside of when he was in his prime with the first or second best receiver of all time, Randy Moss, who nobody could guard, nobody could cover. And so, I just look at this thing and I think it's imperfect. They're opposites. Opposites can work, but it's not. The term isn't opposites create long-term successful marriages. That's not what people say. All right. Secondly, the college football playoff rankings, the first rankings came out last night. Alabama 1, Notre Dame 2, Clemson 3, Ohio State 4. Shocker. Bama, Clemson, and Ohio State are in the top 4. Listen, I'm in the media, but I'm not always of the media. A prime example, Austin, Texas is in Texas. But if you've ever been to Austin, it's not of Texas. It's very liberal. It's party. It's fun. It's music. I have a place in Park City, Utah. It's in Utah. It's not of Utah. It's loose. It's fun. It's a lot of Dallas money, L.A. money, a lot of partying. When I look at college football, I am in the media, but sometimes not of the media. The media needs to stop arguing that BYU got ripped off. They're not in the top 4 or 5. Shut up. BYU's got 2 NFL players in their 2 deeps. Clemson's got 41. Ohio State's got 38. Alabama's got 44. Stop it. It's a dumb argument. Folks, this playoff has been around for 6 years. Bama, Clemson, or Ohio State have been in it, one of them, in every year. Watch recruiting. Yesterday, Ohio State in the last week got the number 1 quarterback and the number 1 wide receiver in the country. Nothing against BYU. Nothing against years ago, Hawaii. Can we stop with this? When I look at the media making this argument, I'm like, I'm not even part of the media. I know I'm media. I'm not of the media. Stop it. I follow recruiting. Ohio State would blow out USC by 30 points right now. And USC has significantly better players than BYU. And I'm not saying BYU wouldn't beat USC because I think they have a good coach and they have a great quarterback, blah, blah, blah. But we got to stop this argument. Oh, I can't believe this team and that team and this team and that team. Folks, college football in 2020 has become women's basketball 10 years ago. There's UConn, there's Tennessee, and maybe Stanford or Baylor. Like it was nothing against women's basketball, but like you knew who the Final Four was, and maybe there'd be one, outlier. That's kind of what I love college football. I talk less college football than I ever have. It's become very repetitive. It's become, and that's not a shot at women's basketball, but it's become women's basketball 10 years ago. There were like 2 programs that were overwhelmingly favored, maybe 3, and then there'd be a new team every year in the Final Four with virtually no chance to win. Now, I think Notre Dame's really well coached. But I do think if they played Clemson again, neutral field, Trevor Lawrence is there, they'd lose by 2 touchdowns. In 6 playoffs that we've had, 2 of the 3, Clemson, Ohio State, Bama, have been in every playoff, and they will again this year. There's not a lot of diversification in college football. I mean, I've told friends this out west. The Pac-12 needs to add Oklahoma and Texas, or they're going to disappear in 5 years. They just have no television exposure. They've got to go and do the best job of recruiting ever. Texas, Oklahoma in the Pac-12 and by the way, the Big 12 is a 2-team conference anyway. The Pac-12 is better academically. The West Coast, the economy's better. Come out west, Texas, Oklahoma, make it a super conference. But everybody's going to argue today. And I love college football, but everybody in the media is just making too much out of these annual arguments about does this team deserve to be in with Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. Stop it. Stop it. The reason Notre Dame is good now and they weren't 10 years ago isn't just Brian Kelly drawing up plays. He's a great recruiter. They've got NFL bodies all over their offensive lines. They have 4 NFL offensive linemen every year and an NFL tight end. They're winning the recruiting war. I follow it. Why is USC not as good? Because they can't keep the best kids in Southern California like they used to with Pete Carroll. You know who's going to compete for the national championships every year in college football. You know when you know it? February 3rd. That's national letter. I mean, it's the same thing in college basketball. Dude, watch the recruiting. Now, there's occasionally an outlier in college basketball like Gonzaga, which has like 1 NBA player and a bunch of borderline guys, and they're juniors and seniors. But college basketball is unique. In college football, everybody's got juniors and seniors, right? Like it's not as, in college basketball, Gonzaga has an advantage. They play a bunch of 19-year-olds sometimes. Now, they're more talented 19-year-olds, but they're kids. Alabama's got plenty of juniors and seniors with great kids. So, but, these arguments about BYU, and again, nothing against BYU. I've watched BYU for 40 years. They've always had a great program. Zach Wilson is terrific. But you're what are you smoking? None of these teams, Cincinnati, BYU. Listen, I had Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern on today. He's a great coach. I think the Bears should give him a call if things don't work with Nagy. But, I mean, Northwestern, every 3rd year they have a little pullback here because their academic standards are higher. It's private. It's hard. It's harder to win at Northwestern. So when they win 9 or 10 games, it's like Pat Fitzgerald should be coach of the year. I can make an argument in college football. Pat Fitzgerald is second to Nick Saban as the coach of the decade. They win 9 and 10 games all the time. At Northwestern, a tiny private school with bad weather. So sometimes media, I'm just over these poor blank school, not near the top 4, 8. Enough. College football now is Ohio State, Clemson, Bama. And occasionally, then there's a couple of like Notre Dame, Georgia. They're darn close. Florida this year is darn close. But they're not as good as those three. They're not.